Hello there guys, RMP792 here. So, we are up to Discovery Season 2 Episode 5, I believe. Ash is back! Yay! Seriously guys, for the love of God, don't make 90% of his interactions with Michael being them going through the whole, oh, we had a relationship and now it's kind of not there, but maybe we should make it, maybe not, maybe not. Seriously, I hate that bollocks. It is possible for grown-ups to admit that while they care for each other, they just don't work as a couple. That happens in the real world. It's happened to me, for Christ's sakes. And I'm terrible with women. So, anywho. Back to vaguely chronological order. So we begin with them chasing Spock's shuttle, which sort of follows on from what they were doing last time, which was chasing Spock's shuttle before they got distracted by big wibbly wobbly swirly things. Sorry, I had a spot there. It'll be fine in a day or two. It's just annoying me while it's there. But yeah, so they're chasing Spock's shuttle. And it attempts to outmaneuver them and flee into a nebula, and short action chase sequence, which doesn't make sense given what we see afterwards. But so yes, and they eventually disable it and bring it on board. And as soon as the door opened, I went, "It's not going to be Spock in there." And I was right, it wasn't. And as soon as I saw the boot, I went, "Oh Christ, it's her." And that's not really a good reaction. Because again, I like Michelle Yeoh. I friggin' hate Empress Giorgio because they did too good a job making her evil. So having her turn up, I'm getting flash forwards to that Empress Giorgio show they want to do. And this entire Section 31 subplot they're doing at the moment feels like set up for that rather than anything else. If I didn't know that series was coming, I suspect I will be a lot less annoyed by it. But yeah, so she admits that she found the shuttle because she's also tracking Spock. She's been ordered to do that by Starfleet intelligence. And so it turns out the guy she was talking to at the end of the previous episode, I assumed the previous episode with her in it, which was episode 3. I assume by the way they were talking in that one that he was her executive officer. It seems he's actually the head of Section 31 at the moment. The actor seemed really familiar as well. I'm not sure why. I'll have to IMDb it at some point. But yeah, so he's actually the current head of Section 31, it seems, and he's also a guy Pike used to know, presumably at the Academy or something like that, before he got swooped up. Too many goddamn people know about Section 31, is what I will say. Here, she sort of shows Pike the black badge, and he immediately knows what it means. Whereas in DS9, is it where Section 31 originated? They were so covert and top secret that nobody had heard of them, and the only and whenever Sisko tried to inquire, the results, the comments from pretty much everybody above him was, "Nah, you're crazy. They definitely don't exist." So the implication was that very few people knew that they existed, and the ones that did were keeping stum about it, which would make sense for an ultra-covert operation. And there is actually an Enterprise episode that reveals that the origin of the name Section 31, which is, I think it's Article 12, subsection 31, states that in time of crisis, Starfleet may do whatever is necessary to preserve the Federation. And Section 31's entire attitude is that there's always a crisis. It's their job to stop it from spiraling out of control. So that's their mantra. They do what is necessary. It might not necessarily be a good thing, it's a necessary thing. So, again, you can do interesting things with Section 31, but they're leaning on it too heavily. They're a thing that work in bits and pieces rather than, it's not quite 2 episodes on the trot, but, at episode 3 and episode 5, having 2 Section 31 plots, and then they're clearly going to be a major factor in this season going forward. I don't know. I think they're overusing the concept. And don't get me wrong, it's a cool concept. The idea of Starfleet having its own dirty tricks department is an interesting idea, because how do you square that with the ideals of the Federation? So that again, it's a fascinating concept, but I think they're leaning too heavily into it. But yes, so that's the thing that's going on there, the ongoing Spock plot. And then we have the main plot of the episode, which is basically what happened to Tilly. And Stamets figures out that the pod is basically some sort of transporter. Slightly goopier than the Federation one, but hey, it seems to work. So those mushrooms are really, really magic, aren't they? But yes, so they transport Tilly into the mycelial network, which somehow has an oxygen-rich atmosphere she can breathe. Because this thing, previously when we've seen people, quote-unquote, enter the mycelial network in that way, it's been their consciousness, not their physical bodies. So the fact that they could, live and survive there, I've been completely fine with. Tilly being able to survive that feels kind of hinky, but yeah, okay, fair enough. So they basically realise, okay, we're going to have to go into the network to rescue her. And they basically explain that the way that the Discovery's jump drive operates is they basically jump through the network for a couple of milliseconds, and then they jump out wherever they want to be, which is fair enough. That makes sense given what they've stated before. So what they basically want to do is kind of a half jump, where they sort of open the breach and shove half the ship into it. And they basically say that half of the ship will be, it's not that you can't survive inside the mycelial network, it's that crossing over into it is hideously dangerous. They basically established that that's what killed the crew of the Glenn back in episode 3, where they all had that weird spiral death thing happen to them. So the comment is, do not touch the barrier unless you're going through the weird cube in the drive room, because that effectively functions as an airlock. If you try to go through anywhere else, you will die quite horribly. And Pike eventually agrees to this plan, so they do it, and the effect looks dumb because the jump effect has never looked good. Again, I never liked the spinny things, and the sort of way it twirls and then drops is. I've not been a fan of that effect personally. I think you could have done something a little more interesting, but oh well. So yes, they're in the network, and May and Tilly have been having a conversation about some sort of intruder in the network. And my first thought was, is it going to be Lorca? Because I'm like 90% convinced Lorca is not dead. Given that he tumbled into the network and sort of he tumbled into the giant sphere and disintegrated. So my money is on him turning up at some point in the future, assuming that. Why am I blanking on the actor's name? Jason Isaacs. There we go. Assuming that Jason Isaacs wants to do it and is available, I could absolutely see them bringing Lorca back in some capacity at some point in the future. So we will see. So that was my first thought. But again, I knew there was going to be an obvious twist where the monster wasn't actually going to be a monster. It was going to be, something that was just misunderstood. But they then go back onto the Discovery. Now it's kind of half in the universe, and the immediate, it's but why would the monster come here? And I sort of went, because the set for the Discovery is a lot cheaper than the effects for the mycelial network. That's like the third time they've done this. They've done something inside the network and then in some way turned it into the Discovery, or had the action take place inside the Discovery, because again, they're clearly saving the budget. And here's the thing, I kind of don't mind that. I mean, do a bottle episode at some point, Discovery. I like bottle episodes. In fact, you did one last season with the Harry Mudd one. That was like 90% bottle show, because that was almost entirely on sets you already had. Because that was entirely set in the Discovery. And episodes like that can be really good. Waltz in DS9 was a bottle show that they made to save money, and holy Hannah, is that a great episode. Because that's basically, that entire episode is basically a two-man play between Kira and I can't remember the name of the Cardassian character. But it's basically a case of, those two are trying to figure out if he's a war criminal, because it's basically a case of he's got some disease, and the only people who had this disease were people who were at this mining camp when it had a specific accident. And so it's basically any Bajoran who was there is treated very well, and any Cardassian who was there was clearly a war criminal, because it was effectively a concentration camp. And it's this interesting thing of what level of guilt does this person who was there but wasn't taking part have? Because he was a file clerk, it turns out. Or he claims he was just a file clerk. And then there's some back and forth about what the hell's going on. It's a fabulous episode. So yeah, you could do a great bottle show. You focus in on character drama, you focus in on relations, and you don't need impressive effects. And so, yeah, that's what we've got going on there. And they basically state that because of the way the magic mushrooms work, they try to eat pretty much anything that comes into their dimension. So normally when you're jumping in and out for a couple of milliseconds, it doesn't matter in the slightest. But if they're going to be there an extended period of time, they're going to try to eat the Discovery. And the comment is, tritanium's pretty tough. It'll take them like an hour before they do any real damage. And I'm just thinking, yeah, guys, if you've got something trying to eat its way through the hull, even if it takes an hour to get through to anything important, that still is going to significantly structurally weaken your plating. You might want to get that replaced at a starbase after you do this, because I wouldn't trust that, even slightly, because metal doesn't heal itself, guys. I mean, it will. I guarantee it won't be an issue in the next episode, but starbase, replacement parts, please, now. But yeah, so Discovery's getting eaten, and it's getting kind of pulled further into the network. And at that point, the ship turns up, and we still don't know what the ship's name is, but it's the super stealthy Section 31 ship. And the last time we saw it, I said there was a kind of shimmery effect on it that made it look like it might have a cloaking device. It doesn't. What it has is a holographic disguise. You actually see this it's brief, but it is very clear that basically there's a asteroid on the screen, and then it drops effectively the holographic disguise around it, so it can't make itself invisible, but it makes itself look like something innocuous, which is it's another sensible way to do something like that, because as a standard rule of thumb, there is no true surprise in warfare. What usually happens is one side mistakes. It's not that they didn't see the important thing; they just thought it was something else. I know what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying it stupidly. It's fine. But yeah, so it's holographic disguise system, which, as I say, makes a certain amount of sense because Starfleet does not have cloaking technology yet. And back to the Ash thing. The reason that they decloak and help is that Ash uses his black badge, which clearly has an early version of the Starfleet comm badge technology in it, because he taps it and says and requests assistance. And Pike just sort of looks at him and goes, "What the hell kind of communicator is that?" And here's the thing: the idea that spy technology from 100 years prior becomes standard technology 100 years later, that I'm absolutely fine with. And again, the Discovery badges are about yay big, at a rough guess, whereas the comm badges later are about yay big. So, and we don't know if that comm badge has all of the bells and whistles of the later ones. So for example, if you watch Enterprise, their communicators are quite a bit smaller than the ones used in the TOS era. But my personal fan theory for that has always been that the Enterprise communicators are basically just radios. They have vastly limited range and they operate only at light speed. At light speed. Whereas I've always assumed that by the TOS era, they've actually made subspace communicators small enough that you can cram into the palm of your hand, even if it's bigger than the ones in Enterprise. But it's worth having a big thing with like 500 times the range and faster than light communications ability, as opposed to something this big that doesn't. And it's a perfectly viable trade-off. And then by the time of TNG, they've shrunk that tech enough to cram it into a comm badge. So again, my assumption is that comm badge probably doesn't have the full range of abilities that the later ones do, and is in a larger thing, but at the same time it does make sense. So yeah, I kind of like that fact that they have that Section 31 has comm badges. That makes sense to me. So yes, they deploy some sort of tractor beam tethery things to try and hold onto them and yank them out. Why they couldn't just use a regular tractor beam, I don't know, but cool. And yeah, this is the point at which we find out what the monster is. It's Stamets' boyfriend. I told you they were going to do this, didn't I? So, you cocked up wildly when you killed him. Bringing him back is still cocking up. I appreciate you're trying to fix your cock up, and there's only so many ways you can do that. You're still devaluing death. And of course, the explanation is complete horseshit based on magic mushrooms, but oh well. Here's the thing: Stamets and Culver were. I liked seeing them on screen together. The two actors have really great chemistry. There were some really quite nicely written scenes between them of them just doing little stuff. The scene of them brushing their teeth together. I actually really like that scene. That's a good scene. And yeah, when Culver was killed for pointless shock value, I was very pissed off. The problem, as I say, is that they've kind of devalued death now that they brought him back. And it's a hard thing. I want the character back while also accepting that it's a narrative mistake. As I said, killing him was a mistake. Bringing him back is its own separate kind of mistake, and we're in two wrongs don't make a right territory. And again, I don't know what the solution there is, because my initial thought was, is this going to be Mirror Universe Culver? Because we know that Mirror Universe Stamets was experimenting with the mycelial stuff. So it's entirely possible that his Culver ended up in the network somehow. But no, this is definitively the one from the Prime Universe, who was somehow, his consciousness was somehow transmitted into the network because Stamets was still connected to it, and magic tears and some other bullshit. Again, these mushrooms have been such a cop-out for this show. Because here's the thing, I'm currently watching The Expanse at the same time. I'm about halfway through season 3. Sorry, I'll talk about The Expanse at some point when I finish the 3rd season. I'd have seen it ages ago if it wasn't for the fact that, well, short version, in this country it was showing on Netflix, and then after it got cancelled by Sci-Fi and Amazon bought it, their deal with Netflix went away, and it's not on Amazon, or it's only just come on Amazon, so we just got the Blu-rays. So, yeah, I'm behind. So I'm only about halfway through season 3, but The Expanse has this thing called the proto-molecule, which is this weird alien thing that nobody on Earth or Mars or nobody in the solar system, because The Expanse is limited to our solar system, nobody really understands, and it keeps doing strange and unusual things. But that's kind of the entire point of that show, is here's something new and terrifying, how does everybody react to it? And of course you've got the people who try to turn it into a weapon, you've got the people who want to use it to learn and everything else. Discovery is doing the same thing with the goddamn magic mushrooms, but they've given much more of an explanation of what they are, and the explanation itself has made it dumber. Because again, they're mushrooms. You can call it the mycelial network as much as you like, but you're basically saying that there's some sort of interdimensional mushrooms that it's dumb. It every time they say it, I feel dumber, and that's coming from a guy who actually really likes well, all kinds of dumb stuff. Quite frankly, again, I'm the guy who likes 40k, for God's sake. That's the most insane, stupid science fiction universe ever created, and it's fabulous because of it. Everything in that universe is insane and over the top. And if that universe had that universe does have magic mushrooms. Orcs are mushrooms in 40k. Yes, that's actual part of 40k canon. But anyway, but yeah, I kind of hate the mushrooms thing. And yeah, they eventually get him out of the network using the transporter that got Tilly in the first place, because of course he can't leave through the barrier because his body is made up of mushrooms, because reasons. But yeah, so they bring him back, and he's clearly kind of traumatized by the whole dying thing. But yeah, and we'll see where it goes. And then Admiral Cornwall turns up and basically orders Section 31 and the Discovery to work together to find Spock and figure out what the hell's going on with these signals. And yeah, that's basically it. And they basically state that Ash is now permanently assigned as the Section 31 liaison officer to the Discovery. So yeah, mixed bag of an episode, quite frankly. There were bits that I liked. Tilly kind of freaking out about being kidnapped, and then decided she's going to have to try and help. Tilly is easily the most likable character on this show, but yeah, it wasn't a bad episode, but a lot of it felt like a cop out and trying to fix a problem that shouldn't have been there in the first place. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got on this one. Episode 6 coming up next. And one more thing. Michael's voiceover at the end. That felt very wrong, because this show doesn't do voiceovers. And then when I thought about it, I realised, wait a minute, this is a Star Trek show. Had they ever done a captain's log on this show? Or a first officer's log, or anything like that? And I don't think they have. Occasionally they'll do just random voiceovers from one character, but I don't think it's ever been done in the context of, captain's log, stardate, blah 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 blah. Here's what's going on. Here's what we're doing. And I appreciate that the primary purpose of the captain's log, in Star Trek has always been an exposition dump. It's, this week on Star Trek we are in X system. We've been asked here by the natives to have a look at their weird volcanoes. Here's the episode. And it's always been a fairly efficient, fairly useful way of doing exposition. But that doesn't mean you can't do interesting things with it. Cause, going back to DS9 again. DS9's in the Pale Moonlight, where Sisko is using his captain's log as a confession for doing what he thinks is wrong. Or there's the DS9 episode where they wanted to do effectively a sort of noir thriller episode with Odo investigating a mystery. And they figured that having Odo make a chief security officer's log as the way for having the classic noir thing of the detective narrating the story and talking about what's going through his head, was a really cool way to do it, and they were absolutely right. And they've played around with it in the other shows as well. Those are just the two examples that usually come to my mind when I'm thinking about Captain's Log. But yeah, Discovery I don't think has ever done a Captain's Log. Or a first officer's log, or anything like that. And yeah, that might be one of the reasons why it often doesn't feel very Star Trek-y to me. So I mean, to be fair, it's entirely possible I just missed the first line of Michael's narration being science officer's log, but I don't think I did. I think it was just narration, and that just feels out of place for whatever reason. So yeah, that was literally my final thought on the episode, and yeah, so ongoing. We've clearly still got the Spock plot. We've got the Section 31 stuff. Spock is eventually going to turn up in this season. We know that they have cast an actor. There is apparently a trailer that involves him, which I haven't seen. I tend to avoid trailers for stuff I know I'm going to see these days because, well, what's it? The purpose of a trailer is to make you go, "Oh, I want to see that." If you know you want to see it and you're going to see it, why spoil stuff? So I'm really. This season has been a vast improvement over the previous season. Still has problems, is what I will say. There's been a really good solid tone shift, and I'm hoping they don't get too bogged down with the Section 31 stuff, because that, as I said, that's something that's very interesting to have occasionally, and at the moment they're leaning a bit too heavily into it. And as I said, I probably wouldn't mind as much if I didn't know that Giorgio show was coming, because all of it feels like set up for her stuff rather than an actual plot in Discovery. Sorry, the spot is really annoying me. But yeah, so that I think is all I've got on this episode. It was good for an episode that was clearly just designed to fix stuff they broke last season. But yeah. So thank you very much for watching. I probably won't have time to do any other topic this week because I've got some stuff on. But yeah, next week I'll have a think about a couple of things I can talk about. Plus, I'm assuming episode 6 of Discovery. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in future videos.